it is kind of pertinent that we focus as a business on creating shared prosperity. If we have our wages well taken care of, if we don't pollute our environment that we do businesses, if we don't only look at ourselves from a shareholder perspective, but the communities we build our businesses in and say, how do we impact this community positively and make sure we bring generational loyalty to our business? You don't require social impact. Gender equity can be pretty much solved by businesses by designing equal access to workforce. Like, could you bring in women as much as you bring in men? Oh, by the way, when you're designing tech, can you now look at the gender diversity from both design and inclusivity perspective? So it's nothing new. Along the way, I think we lost our way and maximized one KPI that was profits. And I think we can just change and look at others equally. And maybe we give a little bit more weight to profit because at the end of the day, we do need to make money, and put a little less weight, but not zero, on other measures of success. And I think it's just social impact puts a good name around it. It is just doing business as a decent, good person.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zenergy Podcast. I'm your host, Karan, and today I'm chatting with Komal Kaul, co-founder of Isotonik Solutions, founder of SAM India Project, and YPO Impact Network Chair, which is where we focus a lot of today's discussion. We dive into our work with the YPO Impact Network, how it operates, key initiatives, and its community engagement strategies. Komal shares insights on the evolution of social impact in business and how YPO encourages business leaders to embrace it. We wrap up with a fun lightning round, including our advice for aspiring change makers. You'll love this episode. Join my conversation with Komal Kaul. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on social media. Hello, Komal. It is an incredible opportunity for me to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time and have been looking forward to this conversation. To kick things off, could you share about your journey and what led you to your current role, one of your current roles, as the network chair for the YPO Impact Network?
Well, Karan, I'm super thrilled to be here. Truly, it's such an honor and pleasure. I just stepped down as the social impact chair for YPO, but still an advocate and a champion. What led me to this is just a series of unrelated events, serendipity, met few people, realized that YPO membership is one of the most informed and lifelong learners as business owners. And what better way to impact society and leave a legacy than to have about 36,000 members think of their business as not only profit, but purpose. And I'm like, if 36,000 businesses around the world will make a decision to impact an issue, we will change it. So it was an easy choice. Once I saw it, it was pretty easy. The journey has been exciting because I do have a great group of business owners who lean into learning and understanding new ways.
That's amazing. And yeah, I think it would be helpful to just give a little bit of an overview on YPO for those listeners who might not be familiar with the organization.
Absolutely. So YPO is a member-led, by invite-only organization of sort of like a group of business owners, C-suite across the world. Our genesis was Rochester, New York, and we came together around vulnerability, lifelong learning, and sharing. So really, as a business owner, where do you find true connection except from peer-to-peer, and where do you really actually learn in peer-to-peer? So majority of our members are in United States, where it started, but we do have members across the world, in South Asia, Asia, Latin America, Australia, Africa, very active membership. We also have about 900 nonprofits in our as our members. And then many of our spouses who are not active, sort of directly members, run large foundations and businesses and as well nonprofits. So a good group of dynamic people. You have to be 50 and under to be invited, but then we do stay in it for a long time, for as long as we can, to benefit from peers.
Got it. And so what do the actual engagements in YPO look like? So are there, I assume, regional YPO districts, and then within those regional districts, the members maybe come together every so often to talk about their business challenges, to network, to have a community be vulnerable with one another, like you mentioned, is one of the core three tenets. Could you just provide a little bit of insight there? Because then I think it will provide a really good undergirding for our discussion on the impact chair's role within that landscape and some of the initiatives that you worked on as the impact chair.
Absolutely, Karan. So we divide it into cities, which are chapters, and then regions, or chapters come together as regions, and then we have what sit across as networks. So we gather a few times, more than at least once a month, if not more, around a learning idea. And then we also gather around with peers for our businesses to understand and deal with the issues in a vulnerable, open environment, which are called forums, what our businesses are doing and how we can sort of be a better leader. But then outside of our business realms, we gather around multiple topics, whether it's environment or whether it is wine or food or global diplomacy, automotive industry, healthcare industry, health and wellness, a bunch of things, not only within the regions and the chapters, but also globally across as networks, to see how we can learn from our members across the globe, right? Like it is very, very not only interesting, but also fruitive. If you have a member in Africa talking to a member in Australia, let's just say around food production and the impact of food production and the climate on their food production business. It's fascinating to bring people together around that. So we do what we call learning events, at least, if not one a month, maybe more. And a member has an opportunity to attend 1, 2, 3, 5, depending on their interest.
Makes a lot of sense. And as the impact chair, I assume you probably have a big purview just given how global the YPO network is, and would love to just get a sense of what some of the actual roles or objectives are of the impact chair, some of which you've talked about already. And then if you could highlight a few key initiatives that you worked on.
So as an impact chair, within the impact networks umbrella, we have about 7,000 members across the world and growing. We kind of came together more, we were organically always existing, but we came together more officially just before COVID hit. So February of 2020, we officially put ourselves in a format, and then we came back to COVID. And all of a sudden, we were very active and very relevant, because we were looking at not only our communities that were suffering across the world, but how could we build bridges very quickly to connect with each other, to make sure that there were supplies, there was understanding, healthcare, even livelihood. Like we were all business owners, and many of our businesses completely shut down. Catering, food production, entertainment, they were completely gone. So not only do you worry about yourself, you need to worry about your employee base. How do they support themselves? So we needed to gather together as network chairs and figure out how do we save not only lives but livelihoods, and how can we come together to support each other. Maybe one person is making alcohol for industrial purpose. Can they pivot and make sanitizers? Could we have somebody who is making air vents? Can be pivoting and making something for respirators, mobile tents, mobile healthcare trucks. One of our members was one of the biggest sort of like real estate person who engaged WHO across the world. Like, how do we create mobile testing centers? So we came together very quickly and realized that there is so much power in us together as a community. Part of my job as an Impact Network Chair was to make sure that they have the latest and the most sort of like important information at their fingertips. Like, can I shine the light on a majority of issues? Like, I focus on social impact, so I'm looking at food, the first like 5 SDGs: food, education, poverty alleviation, gender equity, and then partnerships, another part of SDGs. Like, how do I bring members around this? Because not all are nonprofits. Some of them really do have some government connections, but my biggest focus has been business is a force for good and should be a force for good. And in addition to profit, we can all benefit from it being the business being led from the profit and a purpose perspective. It is easy to say, but how do I empower my members through education, connection, partnerships to do so? So one of our initiatives along this was Global Impact Summit, which had never been done. I did the inaugural one in Costa Rica, where we brought about 200 businesses from all over the world to focus on food security, climate impact on food, gender equity, and how do we empower rural parts of the world with job creation, shared prosperity, electricity, renewable sources, and health, access to equity and health and education. So a lot of topics, a lot of resources come together to create an event where once seen cannot be unseen. So each of my member goes back home and is compelled to take action.
Kudos, because I have been involved in organizing conferences and I know how much work goes into them on the back end. So I only can imagine how much effort you put in organizing a global conference, bringing in 200 businesses to Costa Rica, and really respect that initiative. Were there any key takeaways that came out of the Global Impact Summit that come to mind?
One most important is there is no learning like peer-to-peer learning at all levels, whether it's a business owner or it's an employee or even children in school. When you have peer-to-peer connection, the learning is lasting and there's an action that always comes out. So my pet peeve around conferences is, okay, so we all heard this and then we went home and we went to another conference and then we went home. And then what? So you can't have only listening. So I'm like, so we always have a call to action. So then we check in with you after 6 months and say, hey, what'd you do on that call to action? And that is very possible when you have a peer accountability. So you 5 of you decide that's what you're going to work on, and then you keep each other honest. And that's really remarkable if it is a bunch of business owners, right? Like across the world. We also we designed the conference in such a way, which was also very critical, is instead of having the people fly from all over the world, can we roll the conference around the world in marginalized, otherwise parts of the world where there is no attention taken, right? Like, so sort of find the local, like the global problem, but a local flavor of it. And then can we gather our businesses that are very close to it to find a local solution, but then also bring in the perspective of our international resources. So minimal amount of flying. Let's not buy carbon credits. Let's just not fly, have all across the world, and make sure that we bring in, connect you to the community that is right here. And what can you do? The beauty of business is they can all start a business and empower a community they are in. So there is always a business owner always thinking of, well, what can I do in this market, and how can I change this? So we did one in Costa Rica, then we did one in Rwanda. We're looking at Vietnam next, and all rural parts of the countries where usually conferences don't go, not large hotels, not big properties. So those were the critical learnings, is like, we don't need to be in New York for a conference. We could actually be in the heart of the problem. And then peer-to-peer learning and a clear call to action, so that when we check in with you after 6 months, we could check in with the resident of Costa Rica, of that area, and say, how did our conference positively impact them?
I really love that. And I want to stay on this thread for a bit because I think it's not a very well talked about topic, but it's one that resonates a lot with me because I love creating platforms for people to share what they're working on. And then hopefully those conversations can actually lead to tangible on the ground developments. So with this kind of decentralized structure that you mentioned, how exactly do you go about bringing in people from communities who might not necessarily normally be able to attend, just given the expense of travel? And would love to just dive into and double click on the exact logistics and like how it takes place in terms of like connecting to people in those communities. Like what do you mention to them as some of the value that they can get from joining the conference? And this is just the conference nerd in me asking this question, but find it really interesting personally.
No, I do too. And I know you spend a lot of time on conferences, and I think there needs to be a redesign around them. The purpose of it is not only learning, but sort of like taking action out of them. So, for example, the Costa Rica one, and then I can talk about the one that's coming up in Vietnam, which organically came out of Rwanda. In Costa Rica, we found the most sort of like sustainably designed and operated property in Guanacaste, and it was sitting between two. Now, this is a commercial hotel, so I'm not saying we were in huts and cottage industry. That's not real life. That doesn't happen. You do need a shower and you do need proper plumbing, and the scale at which we were operating. And another thing that I've always focused on: if a large business can demonstrate sustainability, a small business will come along. It usually doesn't happen the other way around. But if I could take a larger property and show that every operation of theirs is fully sort of in a circular form and sustainable, whether they use geothermal to heat their water, whether they use locally grown food and they have their own agriculture that they support. They also built, so what we did was we selected the hotel, looked at it from all aspects, not only just do they conserve water, but how do they impact their local community? And we set up tours for the forest around. Of course, it's a national forest, but we brought in the local guides and we had the local guides talk about, well, when or even from the airport transferred to the hotel, we lumped up people into one like bigger buses, and we like people had to wait at the airport. And again, these are my YPO members used to ultimate luxury, but they were comfortable just hanging out at the airport waiting for the next two flights to come in. And then we had them talk about how this road was built. This road was built by the hotel so that the local population can have transportation. And we also talked to the local population along the way. We stopped at a supermarket. Well, when was this supermarket built? Well, this supermarket was built to support the hotel. So the supermarket wasn't there until the hotel showed up. And then we had, as we drove further up, we talked around to the farmers, stopping along the way, asking them, well, how does this hotel impact you? Costa Rica is a completely green economy. And one of the best, simplest answers I got from a simple farmer, he's like, when you build a green hotel and you don't think about the economy around that, your buses will come and go, and eventually I will be very envious of your growth. When you make sure that the population, the ecosystem, and the environment is all protected, when I get to work and be a part of this, and also make sure that my land is protected and my farms are protected and my environment is protected, then I'm a part of it. So they trained the local population, they built the roads, and we made sure our membership attending was not only listening to resources, but was out and about talking and seeing how a business can be effective. And it's a large commercial hotel. It's not a small property, but we had behind the scenes, we had local people come and talk as to what they think. Your masseuse was from the local community who used to be a pig farmer. And we had her come and talk about her sort of journey from being a pig farmer to a masseuse. And she started her conversation with, I'm sorry, my hands are really calloused because I used to be a pig farmer. So when I will do the massage, it's not going to feel very good. But that's the conversation I want to have, is like, how do you really involve the local community? And that's how we have designed every conference, to make sure you understand where we are and why we are there and what do the local people feel. So hopefully that answers your question as to like we design them.
It really does. And so important. I think also one thing that I would like to highlight, which you touched upon earlier, is just by organizing the conference in these somewhat remote areas in a developing country like Vietnam or the other locations that you mentioned, in itself then provides exposure to business owners who might not necessarily have, experienced those communities before. So like simply the fact of organizing it in that location then compels someone who might not necessarily have experienced that area in their past, but can really then open up their eyes to what's happening around the world.
Absolutely. And we also cap these conferences so our footprint's not too big when we enter these communities. You don't want to disrupt. So yes, very attractive to have 1,000 people at your conference, but we really do cap it at 200 max, and sometimes at 150 or even 100 people. Because when you enter a community, you really should not be disrupting everything unless you are going to impact it positively. So we do try and reduce our footprint. We don't want to upset the local community because all of a sudden all these wealthy people have shown up.
Mm-hmm.
So we do not go and do anything out of the ordinary that community. So simple buses, simple cars, simple everything. We don't have big celebrations. We don't have large dinners and things that would upset the local community in any which way. But our aim is to spend more time and understand not only the local problems, but also highlight the local businesses that are working in that region. So for in Vietnam, in one of our members, Kapil Seth, who's the director at Sol, and his big contribution, they were on a vacation in Myanmar, ended up building microgrids for the whole community. What an incredible person. So, he's also, he's launched a couple of energy products. Sol Partners is one of his primary, but he created not only local access to energy, he created jobs, training, and now he's a part of this in Vietnam. So our membership will not only learn from him in his journey, but also the community that he believes he has impacted. So we'll bring in people who actually will talk about whether it impacted them positively or not.
Which segues really nicely into a question or sort of series of questions that I have regarding how business and social impact converge. So, as the social impact chair at YPO, or the previous social impact chair, I feel like you have a really great position from which to view how really successful business owners are viewing their role in terms of facilitating impacts, or trying to think of another word, but I can't think of a word that captures the essence of impact as well, like goodness or positive effects beyond the monetary implications of that specific business. Would love to just get a sense of whether, because I know you've been in YPO for a long time now, how you've seen the evolution of business owners' perspective as it pertains to their desire to make an impact outside of their specific business operations, and how they sort of look at that.
Business is a force. We just know that. Like, we live in a capitalistic society, and none of it works alone, right? So unlike government and nonprofits, a business has an ability to pivot at a much rapid pace. I don't know when we decided that it should not be a force for good in addition to building money. Why are the two sort of not, like, why are they independent of each other? You could be making a lot of money while doing a lot of good at the same time. And you don't have to be building a charitable organization to do so. Let's just look at the clean tech and the energy, because you do focus on that. Now, if you really think about only planet, then as you design a product, you will oversee the impact of your business on people in the community you're setting up this project in. A simple thought to the community you're going to be building your infrastructure in could really make you a force for good. So if you decide that I'm going to not only build these infrastructures anywhere, but also in rural communities, generally marginalized communities. Let's just look at Virginia and New York, which got marginalized because of coal industry shutting down and manufacturing shutting down. Could you just move those businesses over there, create education, access to clean energy, health outcomes are better? Because prosperity brings ability for people to make choices, and business can bring prosperity. There is no one versus another. We don't have to choose one versus another. We could just do it all and do it well, mindfully. I have always had that issue with the clean energy sources. I'm like, talk about people. I mean, you have the most ability to impact people. Biofuel back in India in 1990s was the most impactful business initiative I had ever seen, because before that, women would use cow dung for fuel to cook, and that was, imagine the health issues, the methane release, the whole day that the woman had to do for cooking food took her entire day. By partnership, public-private partnership, they designed a biofuel, which was literally called gobar gas. The woman was able to have better health, get out of this rut of disgusting work the whole day to cook a meal for their families. The business owners made a lot of money because that was the primary source, and the government sort of like subsidized it. We could roll it across the country. It changed the mindset of people, and business always can. Think about what a business really does. It actually solves a problem while keeping itself alive. Could we not solve big issues of the world while keeping ourselves alive? We could. We just have to think of multi-stakeholders and think what else can we bring while maximizing our profit. It's not independent of each other. And that's what I kind of have spent my time in YPO convincing is you're not just a force. You could be a force for good, because if you're not, then you're a force for negativity. That's how we pollute and sort of take advantage of our workforces. You are a force regardless. You should and could be a force for good. So, and best example of it is Tata's in India. They've built a country, they've built research, they've built community, education centers, and they're extremely wealthy business in the world.
Yeah, because social impact in a way is sort of a new phenomena where impact investing has really only come up, at least from my understanding of it, over the past 2 or so decades. And I have recently had the opportunity to interview Nancy Fund, who started one of the first impact investing VC operations called DBL Partners. And I feel like you sort of similarly have a really interesting position where I have had a lot of VCs on the podcast, but YPO is somewhat different in the sense that a lot of the companies within it are like really successful. They have hit certain revenue thresholds and not necessarily VC funded. Many might be, but a lot probably also aren't. So I think it's like a sort of different strata of person/business. And you did touch upon this slightly, where you were mentioning how you have spent some time trying to educate YPO members on how you can converge the two and still financially really benefit. So I would love to just dive somewhat deeper into that sentiment. Have you found YPO members to be pretty aware of impacts in business and the convergence of two? And like, have you seen that shift either grow over time, decline? What is the general assessment of how that perception has evolved?
The beauty, another big thing about YPO is we renew our membership. Like you're 40 and under. So our incoming members, for us to stay relevant and alive, our members are all young members. And then of course you kind of age into gold, which we make fun of, but our incoming membership is all young and new like you. And the younger generation is already asking these questions. They're already saying, where is the the good in this? Where is the right way of doing business? There is a historic shift in our workforce now is asking these questions. How do you produce? How do you treat people? What about the environment? What about your community? What about education? These questions are being asked. So we kind of, as an organization, have to focus on this to stay relevant, because how will we bring in new membership? But those new membership also, from a peer-to-peer learning perspective, give you a shift in your mindset. Like, if you want to bring in Gen Z as your employer, this is what you need to think about, because this is what they're asking. We've also had incredible success with our VCs, like our businesses who are VCs, like Eva Yazari's Beyond Capital. We have Beyond Bamboo Capital. We have a few businesses that are focused on impact and have built that bridge for us. So yes, as an organization, we see that shift, but also we are lifelong learners. So I may be hesitant as a small business in Kansas who's never had the exposure. But then when I meet somebody from Colorado, or I meet somebody from New York, or I meet another of my peer from somewhere else, and they walk me through it and go like, dude, like, it's not necessary that you have to be one versus another. Oh, by the way, your skill shortage is because you cannot attract talent that is asking you, how are you doing business? Let me help you figure this out. And these are the resources. So yes, as a social impact is not a new thing. It's just that we have put a nice language around it. It is kind of pertinent that we focus as a business on creating shared prosperity. If we have our wages well taken care of, if we don't pollute our environment that we do business in, if we don't only look at ourselves from a shareholder perspective, but the communities we build our businesses in, and say, how do we impact this community positively and make sure we bring generational loyalty to our business? You don't require social impact. Gender equity can be pretty much solved by businesses by designing equal access to workforce. Like, could you bring in women as much as you bring in men? Oh, by the way, when you're designing tech, can you now look at the gender diversity from both design and inclusivity perspective? So it's nothing new. Along the way, I think we lost our way and maximized one KPI, that was profits. And I think we can just change and look at others equally. And maybe we give a little bit more weight to profit, because at the end of the day, we do need to make money, and put a little less weight, but not zero, on other measures of success. And I think it's just social impact puts a good name around it. It is just doing business as a decent, good person.
Agreed. Are there any pieces of advice that you would have as it pertains to educating or speaking to business owners and conveying impact as a means for them to also build a sustainable business? And I don't know if I framed that really well. Essentially, what I'm trying to ask is, because there are a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are maybe earlier in their career or a few years into their career and deal with people who have been working for decades, who've established strong businesses, and you have a lot of experience dealing with those business owners on a pretty regular basis. So is there any piece of advice that you have as it pertains to engaging those business owners through a productive conversation to like help maybe shift them slightly away from profit? Of course, profit is very important. And I mean, business in itself, as you mentioned, is providing value and solving problems, but additionally, adding more impact metrics into their orientations. Does anything come to mind?
Few things. We are business owners ourselves. I have always felt that there is sort of like this hijacking of that's probably not the right word, but sort of, this is us versus them. Then there are nonprofits that work on a problem, and then there are businesses. And I think that it's not that. Most of us, I believe in goodwill. I believe people are inherently wanting to do the right thing. So my most favorite time is when a business owner goes like, I don't believe in it. And I'm like, you do nothing that is good for the society. And then they will go like, no, well, I've planted these trees and I've done this and I have only women in my board. And then you kind of point them and say, you're already doing all these amazing things. Could you just like do them more consciously and make them a process and a policy in your business. It's easier to shift them a little bit at a time and let them see that they already are involved in doing. And the other thing is also sometimes they are so pressed as CEO. I know nobody talks about a CEO's responsibilities and pressures and burnout, but they are so pressed that if you give them a tool rather than point a finger and say, you shouldn't do it like this, but here, have you tried this? Always works. And the money is already dictating those things right now. Impact investing dollars and others are only going certain way. In fact, large investment banks are saying you get more money if you do certain things right. You take care of your people, take care of your environment. If you want the change to happen, give the tools and let them see it clearly rather than point fingers, because nobody is really going out wanting to do bad things. It just is what has been rewarded traditionally. And I've had tremendous success if I can only give them, ways to solve the problem rather than saying you are creating a problem.
Amazing.
So, don't point the finger.
Very important.
Lend a helping hand.
Let's keep them coming. And we only have a few minutes left, so would really want to get to this lightning round. One leadership trait that's crucial for creating impact. Does anything come to mind?
Ability to listen carefully and thoroughly.
What's one book every aspiring impact leader should read?
Scarcity by Senthil Mullainathan. Absolutely necessary book to be read.
What's your biggest inspiration when it comes to driving impact?
Your generation. You guys are relentless and you ask the questions and we have to answer them.
Who is one historical figure that you would like to grab dinner with?
J.R.D. Tata.
For young professionals or entrepreneurs wanting to create impact, what's your best piece of advice?
Don't separate business from impact. Business done well is a force for good. So don't do one versus another. They don't have to be in silos.
Very powerful way to end. Do you have any closing thoughts?
My gosh, I don't know, Karan, thank you for this. This has been amazing. What you're doing is incredible. And the clean tech is an industry that will create more social impact than ever is talked about. Access to electricity pulls people out of all things that keep them back as we go digital. So keep the conversations going. Just shine the lens that as we take care of the planet, we are actually taking care of the people that are on this planet by these businesses. So great job there.
Love that. Thank you so much, Komal, for taking the time. It was a pleasure to have you on the podcast and grateful that you participated.
The pleasure was all mine, Karan. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for checking out the Zenergy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It would mean so much to me and the rest of the team. We release episodes every Thursday, so stay tuned for all new episodes featuring industry leaders building a cleaner, greener future for us all. See you next time.